Ferdinand I. Born in 1793, he took the Austrian crown in 1835 and was forced to abdicate during the 1848 revolution. He is almost always swept to the side in any telling of this period of history. His whole story is often summed up with a mistranslation of a phrase he once uttered: "I am the emperor and I want dumplings." He was more than a man who wanted dumplings, though. He was born a Habsburg, one of the most famous families in history, and the expectations on him could not be higher. But this same bloodline is what would lead to the many issues he would suffer throughout his reign. Let's start with that bloodline. His dad was Francis II of Austria, the emperor who fought Napoleon. Okay, cool. He lost the battles but won the war. And his mother was Maria Theresa of Naples. And it turns out these two weren't just first cousins, but double first cousins. Meaning, instead of having 8 different people as their grandparents, they had 4. And if we go further back in his Habsburg bloodline, of course, there is many instances of similar inbreeding. All this would be levied by many historians as the main cause for his biggest flaws and the reason his emperorship ended in abdication. Ferdinand likely lived a painful life as he suffered from hydrocephalus, easily understood by its other name, water on the brain. This would cause him to have other disabilities like epileptic seizures and a speech impediment. He was a coherent person, but he would have many seizures throughout the day, making it hard to rule as anyone could imagine. Speaking of ruling, why did his father want him to rule when he had other capable heirs? Historians seem to point to the favor of Metternich in the eyes of Francis, because Metternich was a staunch believer in tradition in what would be the right or conservative ideas of the time. And in relation to monarchy and crowns, this meant passing all titles to the first son, which was the traditional thing to do in Austria at the time. Metternich really was acting like a Carolingian-era mayor of the palace by doing this, playing to his own interests, really. Knowing of the disabilities of Prince Ferdinand, Metternich, someone who had fought hard to maintain his family's power as well as Austrian power, could easily control that power more, using him as a puppet emperor. In his will, Francis would tell his son to essentially let Metternich and the other advisors of state run things. Metternich would still have to scheme against the family of Ferdinand, particularly with regards to the throne. Ferdinand's Aunt Sophie, who would get her sons Franz Joseph crowned as a result of the 1848 revolutions, and even got rid of Metternich. But this isn't their story. What was Ferdinand doing before 1848 while everyone was running the state? This man was a Habsburg no matter his disability, so love and marriage were in the cards. He was married to Maria Anna through what seems to be a somewhat political marriage for the fathers. She was a woman with a twin and distant relation to Ferdinand through Empress Maria Theresa. They would have no children, but she would love and care for him over the years, looking over him as a nurse. Their marriage was technically never consummated, but there's no reason to leave a guy like Ferdinand, whose wealth and business ventures would protect him after his forced abdication. Much of his reign resulted in various crackdowns on freedoms of the different ethnic groups ruled by the Habsburgs at the time. Many of the decisions regarding these groups I doubt he had a say in. I mean, we can see the ignorance to the situation and what he is claimed to have uttered when he saw the revolutionaries outside the palace. But are they allowed to do that? With the revolutionaries outside the palace, Ferdinand and his wife would flee, but not before giving the throne properly to Franz Joseph. In his diary, he actually wrote about the event. The affair ended with the new emperor kneeling before the old emperor, asking for a blessing, which I gave him. Laying both hands on his head and making the sign of the cross, then I embraced and kissed our new master. The Austrian government would concede to some demands, but roll them back, and Franz Joseph would take the throne in a more autocratic direction, leading to the assassination of his nephew, who was just as autocratic as Franz, which would kick off World War I. But what about our guy? Ferdinand would escape to Prague, where he was still technically King of Bohemia, and the people liked him, giving him the nickname Ferdinand the Good, but also some mocked him as Ferdinand the Finnish. It seems either way, being away from the throne was good for Ferdinand. He was able to grow his private fortune and was bankrolling part of his nephew's actions as the emperor. He even got a little sassy after the Battle of Königgrätz in 1866, saying, "Even I could have achieved that," after his nephew got worked. I think Ferdinand was a man who was given a tough lot in life with the disabilities he suffered, but his overall friendly nature seems to have endeared him to the citizens of his empire, and despite the despotic choices of his advisors, he would still get praise from the citizens. There's, of course, more details to Ferdinand's story, too. He survived an assassination attempt in 1832 by a disgruntled army captain, and his sister, who seems to not have had any of the health issues of Ferdinand, was Napoleon's second wife, Maria Louise. Ferdinand would go on to live till the year 1875, where he would pass away at the age of 83, and he was buried in the imperial crypt.